Everybody says discipline is so important, but they never want to tell you why. I'll tell you why discipline is so important. It's the strongest form of self-love. It's ignoring something you want now for something better later on. Discipline reveals the commitment you have to your dreams, especially on days where you don't want to. The future you is depending on the current you to keep the promises you made to yourself yesterday. If you've ever struggled with discipline, you're not alone. I spent over a decade consciously trying to build lasting habits in my own day-to-day life. However, it was only a few years ago that things really turned the corner for me. Through countless hours of research, my own A/B testing, and hundreds of interviews on my own podcast with people that are very high performance, I finally feel like I found the sustainable solution. Stop trying to do everything all at once. I used to be stuck in a cycle of failed routines and broken promises to myself. Here's what finally worked. Imagine that this is your starting point. You don't train often or have any health and fitness goals. Your sleep schedule is a mess. You don't allocate any time to be alone with your own thoughts. You're not reading, you're not eating well. And these are all situations that I found myself in the past. It's all well and good saying, from tomorrow onwards, I'm going to be in the nice bath, I'm going to journal, I'm going to meditate, I'm going to eat well, I'm going to sleep well, I'm going to start going to the gym. But that takes practice, that takes repetition, and it takes execution and practice to be able to make that a lasting habit. Going from 0 to 100 isn't going to work. As with many things, building long-lasting discipline is about taking small but consistent, sustainable steps. If you've only been to the gym once in the last 6 months, try going once a week for a period of time. If you never read, it might be worth starting with an audiobook on a Sunday morning walk. It's all about starting slowly and building things up bit by bit over time. So my recommendation is to choose one thing to focus on to start with and use that as the first brick of many that you can stack on top of one another over time. Find your community. What if I told you that you can make this easier for yourself by finding like-minded people to support you? Starting something new, whether it's a sport, habit, or lifestyle change, is tough. No doubt about it. But there's no faster way to succeed, learn, and understand than by finding other people doing what you want to be doing and doing it with them. Take running, for example. You can try it on your own, and yeah, maybe it'll stick if you've got the right plan and you've got the motivation to get that momentum building, but it's much easier if you know that on Tuesday evenings at 7 p.m, you're gonna be meeting the local running club. And if there's some accountability there's some friendly faces that you can get to know, that's gonna give you a much higher incentive through community for you to make that a habit. The whole motivation versus discipline arguments happened online a lot, and I'm not going to dive into that too much today. But if you need motivation to get the ball rolling to build discipline, then having that external accountability can be a great way to get things moving. I know that trying new things can be scary, especially around strangers, but trust me when I say, having been in this position myself, having suffered from depression and experiencing a suicide attempt in May of 2016, I know how difficult it can be to break that inertia and get things moving, but the positives far outweigh the negatives, as intimidating as it can be. Learn from those that are existing like the person that you want to become, or find those people that are on the same journey as you and execute it with them. Keep it simple. The fastest way to fail at anything is by trying to start at the top rung of the ladder rather than at the bottom and climbing your way up slowly but surely. You wouldn't try and train for the 100 meters like Usain Bolt did, because you are not Usain Bolt and don't have the years of experience, genetic potential, and physical work capacity to be able to do so. No, you would start from where you are and build up your ability to tolerate 100-meter training over time. You may just become Usain Bolt along the way, or compete with his times. I'm sure you probably can't become Usain Bolt. We're not that advanced technologically just yet. But what I'm trying to say is that trying to emulate Usain Bolt when you want to make improvements in your world is not the way to go. We've already agreed that you're not going to kick things off by trying to change 5 things all at once and start from scratch. We're going to start slowly and build up consistently. We're going to try and find people to do it with, and we're going to take it bit by bit. Yes, this video is about discipline, and in that sphere we can often hear phrases like go hard or go home, or embrace the suck. But we don't need to adopt this mentality from the off. We can still make it fun, scalable, and enjoyable along the way. So when I say keep it simple, I mean that you want to remove friction when it comes to building habits. So if you want to start going to the gym, make sure you've got a structured and clear training program. There's actually one in the link in the description down below from Omnia Performance, whereby you can start building up your time in the gym alongside your running and aerobic capacity so that you've got a clear structure to work from. If you want to start meditating but hate the idea of sitting still, then just take a walk without having your phone in your pocket or doom scrolling as you go, and be at peace with your surroundings and be alone in your own thoughts for probably the first time in a while. That's tick the mindfulness box off, and whilst it isn't you sitting at the top of Mount Everest like this, like Wim Hof might be with his top off, it's the first step towards potentially getting to that stage if that's the stage you want to get to. These small, easy steps will add up over time and will compound and will become a new version of you, because familiarity doesn't take long to rewire, and the reason that building discipline is tough tough is because we have a familiar sense of what's normal for us on a day-to-day basis that we're trying to flip on its head and change. So it's meant to be difficult. But the best thing about that is we get used to some sense of familiarity here and we can quickly make it here. There's no point in saying you're going to run a marathon if you haven't yet ran a 5K. So it's important to think about that brick on brick on brick on brick, climbing the rings up the ladder mentality and making sure that you're not punishing yourself for not being at the top of the ladder, when in reality, the reason that people have got to the top of the ladder is because they grabbed it at the bottom in the first instance. So set yourself up for success by taking easy wins, reduce the friction, and take things one step at a time. A small step forward is just as valuable as a big one, and the only way you're going to achieve the big ones is by stacking up the small ones over time. There's no such thing as an overnight success. Social media can maybe blur that perception sometimes, but the reason the people you look up to, the reason the people that you see up the top here are the way they are, is because at one point in their lives, they took those small steps and over time have focused on reducing the friction to build them and maintain them. Keep it simple. Don't start at the top ring of the ladder. Climb it slowly but surely. If you stay the same, what are the consequences? Back in 2018, I found myself lost, unmotivated, lacking purpose and fulfillment, and slipping back into a sense of depression that I hadn't experienced since 2014 to 2016. One simple decision changed all of that for me quite quickly. In 2018, I opened up my laptop one day in a coffee shop in London to get on with the day's work, and I just got overwhelmed with this sense of stress and anger, and I can't even really describe it. It was just an overwhelming sensation that I wasn't the person that I wanted to be, that I was lacking fulfillment, that I didn't like the job I was doing, that the lifestyle I was leading wasn't the person I believed myself to be, and something had to change. So I knew in that moment to address the consequences of what would come if I kept existing the way that I was not something I wanted to tackle. So I thought, okay, what can you do? And that's where I signed up and committed to my first ever Movember fundraising event. I've since raised over £100,000 for the charity, the world's leading men's health charity, and I've done so through a variety of silly and challenging endurance events over the years. And for my first one, I attempted to squat 500,000 kilos in 24 hours to represent the 500,000 deaths by suicide in men around the world. In the process, it gave me a goal to work around and structure my discipline and habits and routine around. It gave me a sense of fulfillment, it gave me a sense of purpose, and it gave me that quote unquote motivation to build the discipline and build the habits and climb those rungs of the ladder slowly but surely. Ultimately, I was 128,000 kilos out of 500,000 kilos in, and after my first half an hour break, my MCL decided to leave the building. And as I lay on the floor, crying my eyes out, feeling that I was being judged by the world around me, that I'd failed, that this was all a mistake, and that I'd embarrassed myself, I realized how much value I'd generated along the way and how much better a person I'd become from that one simple decision in that coffee shop to make a change. The consequences of this right now far outweighed the consequences of me going down that negative path that I was on in the first instance. Now, I'm married, have two incredible but pretty mental dogs. I have a home, I have a life that I'm very proud of. I've got two businesses, I've got a team around me. I've got a lot of the things that I never thought I would ever have in the situation I was in back then, and I'm very proud of myself for being here. But I wouldn't be here if I haven't changed my circumstances, my environment, and the direction that I was going. Which is what forces me to reflect on the consequences of inaction versus the consequences of action. We are over 6 years away from when I made that decision, and it doesn't feel like it's happened overnight. It's been a very steady process of building and building and building and building. But if you'd asked me in 2018 where I would be now, I could never have even conceived of the progress that would have been made from that point onwards. But that progress has only come as a result of one small step forwards. You don't need to wait for a life-changing decision, and I actually thoroughly believe that you shouldn't wait to hit rock bottom before you start building from the ground back upwards, but you do need to want and desire to make a positive change in your life. The bigger the desire, the more driven you'll be to achieve it. A great way to consider this is to consider what you're running towards or what you're running away from, and they're very different things in terms of internal considerations versus external. If you're running towards a Lamborghini Aventador as an external metric of success that you want to measure yourself against, that might be a very useful motivator to get you doing things and moving things forwards. But I do truly believe that we need to understand who is the person that we don't want to be and what are the actions and behaviors that we can exhibit to avoid being that person, to make sure that we are being the best versions of ourselves on a day-to-day basis. Difficult to measure success at a human level, but I think the easiest way to do that is with day-to-day happiness. I think it was Jimmy Carr that said the meaning of life is to enjoy the passage of time, and I think that's a very beautiful way of summarizing it, because that's all we can do. If we're not enjoying the passage of time, then maybe something needs to change. And if we are sacrificing the passage of time for the hope of something in the future, then whilst that might be valid as a way of getting momentum built, we need to make sure that we're not losing sight of the here and now along the way, which I've fallen into the trap of a fair few times. So if there are negative experiences or circumstances that you can use to push you forwards, I'd encourage you to really reflect on them and try and use them to create a framework and a structure and a goal for you to move away from them so that you can become a better version of yourself. It's important to highlight the outliers because discipline isn't about doing everything perfectly, it's about doing the important things consistently. If you're sat there thinking, well, I can't do any of this because of X, Y, Z, I've got 4 kids, I've got this job, I've got shift working, I'm an emergency services worker, I've got an illness that can flare up around this. Obviously, I'm speaking from a place of huge privilege here and everybody's circumstances are different, but there are countless examples of outliers out there that will make the most of their circumstances. That's all we can do as individuals. Whatever the circumstances we are given, we have control over some elements to maximize what we can do within those. Some people are parents, some people aren't. Some people work 9 to 5, some people have flexible shifts, some people work for themselves, some people have trust funds. There's a wide range of circumstances out there, and there's going to be a number of factors out there that ultimately make it difficult for you to build discipline within your situation. But whatever your situation, you can build discipline around those circumstances. The easy thing to do is to look at other people's situations and say, oh, well, they've got it easier than me, so I'm not going to make a change. It's not possible. The more difficult thing to do is to reflect on your own circumstances, understand them, and then build discipline within them. Somebody always has it tougher than you do, and using other people as scapegoats for your own lack of discipline is not going to be moving you forwards at any rate at all. Let's take Johnny, my business partner, who's just behind this wall here. He's been my coach for 6 years. He has 4 children. He's 48 years old. He still trains for ultra endurance events. He still lifts 3 or 4 times a week. He still manages to spend most of his weekends with his kids whilst also getting out for a decent aerobic session in the mornings on Saturday mornings. Does that mean that he's a bad father? Absolutely not. He's a fantastic father. Does that mean that he has to reflect on his circumstances and make some compromises and sacrifices around certain things to prioritize what's important to him and his family? Yes. But does that mean that he's going to be able to exist like the 22-year-old with no kids and a trust fund? No. But that's the whole point. We all have individual circumstances. We're all uniquely placed to be the best version of ourselves within those circumstances. And we should do what we can to grab that opportunity by the balls. If Johnny said, oh, well, I can't do anything because I've got 4 kids, he would be unhappy and he would not be as useful and reliable a father for those 4 children as he currently is. Any kids, which means there'll be people on the internet who'll go, well, try doing this with kids. I look forward to the opportunity to be able to do that, to the challenge, because 1, I'm very excited about being a father, and 2, I'm very excited about learning about myself along the way in terms of what is truly important to me within that change in circumstances. I don't want to sound preachy in any way, I don't want to sound rude in any way, but there are countless examples of people out there that make their difficult situations work, and I appreciate there might be some people out there with horrific situations where what you can make work within those circumstances or situations is not as much as the person on the internet talking about ice baths and meditation and this and that, but it's doing what you can to the best of your ability, not trying to do everything to the best of your ability, because they're 2 very different things. At the core of all this for me personally, as you might have been able to pick up on, is your reason why. And honestly, I haven't really said this a huge amount on the channel recently. I've been wrestling with my reason why quite aggressively for the past 6 months or so. I feel like I've lost sight of it a little bit. I feel like I've evolved as an individual. That for my own mental well-being and for my own reasons why when it comes to discipline that I execute on a day-to-day basis, I've been challenged. So I think for you, it's important to think about why do you want to become disciplined? Why do you want to make a change? And how can you create goals and structures around that to make sure that that's always front of mind for you? For me, I'm currently moving house. I'm reallocating things so I can spend more time doing the things I'm actually good at and enjoy doing. And it means that there's a lot of challenge along the way to get there. And there's been days where my discipline has been truly tested. There's been days where I've pushed a run from one evening into the following morning, which is only something that I do when I know that I'm really stressed. So reflecting on my reason why has been a really important part of this for me. And I'm firmly of the belief that if you don't have a strong reason why, intrinsically, you are not going to be able to make sustainable, long-lasting habits that leave you as a disciplined individual. Because external motivation is great, but intrinsic motivation is much more fulfilling, it's much more rewarding, it's much more ever-present, and it means that when you wake up in the morning driven and excited to crack on, what are the habits that are going to get the best out of you as an individual to then work towards those external motivators, to work towards the bonuses, to work towards the things that really put a smile on your face. But as I've said, if the goal of life is to enjoy the passage of time, then we need to make sure that we're doing the right things for the right reasons. And remember that discipline isn't about doing everything perfectly, it's about doing the important things consistently. The future you is depending on the current you to keep the promises you made to yourself yesterday.